Well, on January 5th of last year, I tweeted from Ephesians 5 on a wife gladly submitting to her husband. Some English newspapers picked it up overnight, and the next morning I awoke to an avalanche of headlines and abuse for my so-called sexist position. The reason for the storm was, as Grant has already alluded to, I was a professional soccer player for 20 years and then a BBC soccer analyst on the TV for 6 before the Lord called me to pastoral ministry. So being captain of Chelsea and playing against David Beckham 1 minute and tweeting the Apostle Paul the next just doesn't jive with some folks. My feed was hit over 1 million times that week, which shows you that the S word is a hot button word. Submission is an ugly word in our culture and even sometimes in the church. But truth is beautiful, and so I have 4 quick theological truths about the beauty of submission. Truth number 1. The beauty of submission is seen in the Godhead. In other words, submission is a Trinitarian reality. No authority in submission, no Trinity. Simple as that. For instance, it's an incarnational reality. Jesus said in John 4:34, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work." So Jesus ate submission. Submission to the Father fueled Jesus' life. It was his sustenance, his strength. It was his food. So true freedom then for any man or woman is not found in doing what you want or being what you want. Jesus shows that true freedom is found in submission to the will of God. Submission is Jesus' food, and submission is also the way he shows his love for the Father. John 14:31, "I do as the Father has commanded me," there's the submission, "so that," here's the purpose, "the world will know that I love the Father." The love of God flows along the tracks of authority and submission, and you cannot separate the Son's love for the Father from the Son's submission to the Father. And the love of the Son for the Father is to obey the Father's will and exhaust the Father's wrath in the place of sinners at Calvary. There is no greater display of love than that. The first Adam didn't submit, but the second Adam did. The Father is the Father because he sends the Son, and the Son is the Son because he submits to the Father's will. Submission is an incarnational reality in the Godhead, and submission is also an eternal reality. Jesus was sent. God so loved the world, he gave his only Son. But Jesus didn't only obey God when he arrived on earth. Peter tells us in 1 Peter 1, verse 20, he was foreknown by the Father, that is, he was chosen. And then he tells us when? Before the foundation of the world. The eternal Son was eternally, functionally submissive to the Father. He was chosen to be sent in eternity past so that the Word could become flesh and carry out his redemptive role in time and space. And submission will also be a future eternal reality. It's in eternity past, but it will be future too. Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 28, and listen carefully here, when all things are subjected to him, then the Son himself will also be subjected to him who put all things in subjection under him, that God may be all in all. In other words, when the Son is finally over all, he is still under the Father. Submission is an incarnational reality and an eternal reality of God's character. Now, we have a problem with submission to authority in our day. Many young men don't know how to lead because they won't submit to leadership. And many young women don't respect good masculine authority because their fathers never showed them what it was like. A.W. Tozer famously said that the most important thing about a man is what he thinks about God. Well, beholding the beauty of submission in the triune God will give us a greater insight into the beauty of submission in human relationships. It is not a mark of inferiority to submit to right authority. It is, in fact, divine. So submission finds its origin in the Son's submission to the Father. Truth number one, the beauty of submission is seen in the Godhead. It is a Trinitarian reality, which leads to truth number two. The beauty of submission is seen in creation. Submission is a creation order issue. It is clear from the beginning that God made man to say something about himself. He made man, male and female, binary sexes, in his image. There is unity and diversity, equality and difference. And the man and the woman were beautifully designed to complement one another and fit together physically and functionally. Firstly, physical fruitfulness, in this case children, requires physical complementarity. I haven't got the time to unpack that, but I'll leave that to you. This is Biology 101. But secondly, Adam was made first, and then Eve. That simple fact reveals order. Adam is given the moral mandate in Eden. Why? Because he was created first. He was given the authority to name the animals and the woman. Why? Because he was created first. Eve was made second as a helper fit for him. Adam was not created as a helper for Eve. This was the unique role God gave her to help Adam complete their mission. But the flow of thought in Genesis 2 is that she is brought to the man as one for him to lead. And this order of authority and submission reflects the very character of God in whose image they're made. That pattern is emphasized by Paul in 1 Corinthians 11 verse 3 when he says, "But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ. The head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. God the Father, Christ the Son, husband, wife." So you see, God weaves submission into the created order, patterned after the Trinitarian order. And that is genius. It's beautiful, sinless creation truth. And we have no authority to deny this order. No authority. The sexes are not designed for competition. They are made for cooperation. And submission, you see, is essential to the success of the harmony. So don't be suspicious of submission. Instead, look to the very first pages of the Scriptures and embrace it. Embrace it. The beauty of submission in creation, you see, is so important to Paul that he uses it as his argument for masculine authority in the church. 1 Timothy 2, verse 12 and 13, you know the verses. "I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet, for Adam was formed first, then Eve." The reason the church should submit to masculine leadership and teaching of the mixed gathering is not because of rowdy women or the culture in Ephesus, but because Adam was created first. Authority and submission in the household of God mirrors the created order. And all the church, men and women, are to submit to the elders, which means, and note this, complementarity doesn't mean that all women submit to all men. All Christians by nature ought to be submissive to all right authority, whether government, marriage, parenting, the church, or workplace. Christ modeled that in his humanity, and Peter commands it in 1 Peter 2, verse 13. And let it be said that no human authority is absolute. It is borrowed. A husband or an elder assumes leadership in submission to God's will for him. So the beauty of submission is seen, number one, in the Godhead, and number two, in creation, which leads to truth number three. The beauty of submission is seen in the gospel. Paul reveals that marriage in creation was always intended to be a picture of God's love in redemption. Marriage in creation always intended to be a picture of God's love in redemption. And he ties the beauty of feminine submission to the gospel portrait. Just watch this, listen to it, Ephesians 5:31. "Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." He's quoting Genesis 2:24, marriage at creation. And then he says, this mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church, God's love in redemption. Marriage in creation, a picture of God's love in redemption. But it's not just marriage in general that's in view here. It has a beautiful shape and form and order. It's marriage involving Christ-like headship of a husband and church-like submission of a wife. And so we read a few verses earlier in Ephesians 5, "Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior." Husband Christ, wife church. So the roles of husband and wife in marriage are no more reversible or interchangeable than the roles of Christ and the church. A wife's submission to her husband's headship portrays the gospel. How glorious a picture is that of your submission, wives? When a wife gladly, intelligently, Godwardly submits to her husband, she shows that Christ who sacrificed for her is a leader worthy to be followed. Her submission is ultimately to Jesus Christ. The church is always feminine with respect to and in submission to her bridegroom, Jesus. So to ignore submission is to distort the gospel picture. And so the question for a wife isn't how much do I have to submit? The question is how well can I submit? How well can I submit? And then you see, Christ becomes her example as one who submitted to the Father all the way to death on a cross. What a countercultural picture wifely submission offers a watching world. The question comes, why do you submit to your husband? And the door opens for the gospel. Wives should model submission to their husbands, and they model it to the children. Older women teaching younger women to submit to their husbands in the church, the bigger family. People equate submission with worth. This is wrong. This is wrong. Women don't get the short end of the creation order stick. Feminine submission has gospel meaning in marriage. So truth number 3, the beauty of submission is seen in the gospel. And the beauty of feminine submission in the gospel picture and in connection to creation is also the beauty of the Son's submission in the Trinity, which leads to the final truth. Truth number 4, the beauty of submission is seen in consummation. It is an eternal destiny. Revelation 19, verse 7. Let us rejoice and exult and give him the glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. The earthly picture of marriage will one day become a heavenly reality. When the Great Commission is finished, and when people are gathered from all the nations, and when Christ returns, the church, the bride of Christ, will live in submission to her bridegroom forever. So submission is not a human idea originating in marriage or the church or the culture. It always was and always will be the way that love is expressed in the Trinity. And get this, brothers and sisters, we, the church, are invited into this triune love, to submit eternally to Jesus and to do his will. Is there a more beautiful destiny than that? So in conclusion, let us be done with apologizing for submission, or speaking about it in hushed tones, or preaching on it without conviction, or doing it without gladness. It is about worship. Let us look at the big picture and see the beauty of submission in the glory of God in the Trinity, in his creation, in his gospel, and in the consummation of an eternal destiny. Teach it this way in your homes and in your churches. And finally, let us affirm the equality of all men and all women. Let us delineate the difference, and let us celebrate both through the beauty of submission in the beauty of complementarity. Thank you.